Hi, my name is Marijana Glavica and I come from the Croatian Social Science Data Archive, CROSDA for short. I wish a warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for coming. This webinar is brought to you by the Coordinate project, which is funded by the European Commission under the Horizon 2020 program. CROSDA is organizing this event on behalf of CESDA ERIC research infrastructure with support from the Slovenian Social Science Data Archives. As an introduction to today's lecture, let me first say a few words about the Coordinate project and also take this opportunity to promote some of the other project activities that might be of benefit to you. The Coordinate project aims to support the preparation of Europe's first cross-national accelerated birth cohort survey of child well-being named Growing Up in Digital Europe, or GUIDE. GUIDE will track children's well-being and development, along with indicators of children's homes, neighborhoods, and schools across Europe. This research infrastructure will ensure a harmonized research design, making the results internationally comparable and highly valuable for research and the development of social policies. One of the goals of Coordinate is to improve access to existing international survey data on children and young people's well-being. Thus, the project offers opportunities for researchers to visit and gain access to international birth cohort, panel, and cross-sectional survey data residing in participating countries. Applicants can apply for bursaries to cover their costs. More information about transnational visits can be found on the Coordinate website. We encourage you to apply. There will be 2 more calls open next year. Furthermore, the project offers training on data management, face-to-face interactive statistical courses, summer schools, and training for non-scientific stakeholders. This aims to support the use of existing data and popularize longitudinal research in general by enhancing knowledge of methodology and statistical analysis. Please follow the events section of the project website for updates. The best way to stay informed is to subscribe to the newsletter and follow on Twitter or LinkedIn. As part of training activities, this event is organized in the form of a webinar, and recordings will be publicly available later. Whether you are analyzing existing data or planning your own longitudinal study, whether you are already have some experience with longitudinal research or you are starting your journey into it just now, I hope that today's lecture will spark some insights for your future work. I will now shortly introduce today's lecturer, Goran Koletic, and I invite him to share his screen and to turn on his camera.
Okay, thank you, Marijana, for the introduction.
So while he's sharing the screen, I will just, yeah. Do you want me to introduce you shortly?
It's okay. I can do it.
Okay. Thank you, Goran. We appreciate your acceptance of our invitation to prepare this lecture, and whenever you are ready, you can begin.
Okay, thank you, Marijana. Thank you for your introduction and for presenting this valuable information about Coordinate project. So just a few words about me. I'm a assistant professor at the Department of Sociology at the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Zagreb. So the lecture I prepared for today is on methodological and analytical aspects of longitudinal research. Please have in mind that it is merely impossible to fit all the relevant aspects into one or so hour of lectures. So basically, this will be a brief, a sort of introductory lecture where in the first part I will cover some relevant aspects of longitudinal design. Then, due to the fact that I was quite recently involved in one large-scale longitudinal study, I will present some of the shortcomings and some of the successes we had done. We had the experience of those. So basically the main part of the lectures will revolve around challenges and recommendations for designing and conducting longitudinal studies. And in the final part, I will just make a brief overview of how to choose your analysis. That is a huge part of that. So also nearly impossible to fit in this short period of time. So without further ado, let's do further. So what is basically a longitudinal design? So it is a situation where it is a data collection with multiple locations across time where you collect data from the same entities, for example, from individuals. To have a proper longitudinal study, or to call something longitudinal, you need at least 3 measurement occasions, three waves basically. 2-wave longitudinal designs should not be called longitudinal. Why? For example, there are two main shortcomings of if you have only 2 waves. For first, it's difficult to disentangle true change from basically from the measurement, your error, which is inherent to your all measurements. And the second one, more important one, is that you can't basically model various non-linear trends. And we usually operate in terms of longitudinal studies, something like 3 to not 10 or maybe maximum 12 waves. If you have more than that waves, maybe you're getting into a field of econometric time series analysis. So where you have a multiple measurement occasions for something like 20 and so on. So for example, the research project I was involved with was conducted in the population of adolescents, and one of our main either predictor or outcome was pornography. So in several of these examples I'll be mentioning either adolescents, either pornography or related to it. So in some cases, in some research fields and topics, and the population is as well, maybe the longitudinal design is the best possible one. So, for example, just to illustrate, on one hand, you have the gold standard for determining causalities, so experimental design. But what about this topic, the topic that I was involved in? So you have 2 major issues. In one point, research ethics are basically precludes to do experiments on minors on the one hand, and the other one is more specific. So it would be quite difficult, even in the age of adolescence, to find a control group, a valid control group that has not been exposed to some sort of sexually explicit material. Okay, then on the other side, you have cross-sectional design, which allows us to determine correlation. So as a sort of a bronze standard. Then in between, basically as a silver standard, you have longitudinal design that allows us to assess temporal effects and the developmental trajectories. Beside that, it also allows us to assess inference of causality, basically one of the prerequisites for causality. So it doesn't help you determine causality, of course, but only an inference of causality. And researchers should be very careful when interpreting those longitudinal results in terms of causality. And of course, let's not forget that we also have qualitative research methods to assess, for example, this kind of topic. So what consists the need for conducting a longitudinal study? Well, first things first, you want to assess some temporal effects or developmental trajectories. Well, that's self-explanatory. On the other hand, you might want to test theory from a longitudinal perspective. For example, it's not uncommon that some of the theories that have been developed in years before and so that they overlook the longitudinal components. So you want to add something empirically to the previous or present theories. Then also while some longitudinal, while some cross-sectional studies, in terms of cross-sectional studies, of course, causality is unwarranted. Well, longitudinal study might provide that already mentioned an inference of causality, which might give you an insight whether, for example, to pursue an experimental design at all. If if there's no this prerequisite that your construct A precedes the construct B, maybe the pursuing the more difficult study design actually is not needed. And of course, you might want to check whether the conclusions differ between, for example, your previous cross-sectional studies and the longitudinal studies. For example, by focusing on effect sizes. Are there any differences in effect sizes, for example, in associations between constructs when they're conducted in the cross-sectional way and longitudinal way? There are some guidelines that suggest that when interpreting longitudinal effect sizes, that lower effect sizes should be considered meaningful when compared to some other effect sizes, compared to effect sizes produced by cross-sectional designs. So basically, if you have this for some of the effect size same in both of the designs, is there any kind of unique theoretical contribution by conducting a longitudinal design? But before, even if you have the need, or you have a hunch that you need a longitudinal study, it's also important how you frame your research questions or your hypothesis. So as I mentioned before, it's not uncommon that some of the theories or conceptual models sometimes overlook when some effect is occurring and for how long does it last. So basically, while framing longitudinal hypothesis, it's not enough to add that A is associated with B over time. That is not a proper longitudinal hypothesis or research question. Instead, you should focus on the unique changes of that construct. For example, when does the change occur? Here we have, think about just very simple example of, for example, relationship satisfaction over time. So when does the change occur? When you have some sort of a drop down in this relationship satisfaction, and for how long does that effect last, and how does it change it? Why does it change it? And more importantly, what are the constructs or what are the factors associated with that change? If you're talking about relationship satisfaction, that might be something like intimacy, trust, commitment, and so on. And then after that, even those constructs might be time related. So what is the nature of that association between two time varying constructs? Do they have increasing or decreasing trend? Are those increasing or decreasing trend, do they have a less or more substantial change over time? Of course, evolving around their association. So a couple of these questions might help you to frame your proper longitudinal hypothesis, instead of just adding that something is different or something is associated over time. The next important thing about longitudinal studies is the sample size, and the recommendation is very simple: as large as possible, mainly due to risks of attrition, which will, I assure you, happen. So while thinking about sample size, there are just a few things that I want to stress. So your total sample size is basically observations. So it's your number of subjects multiplied by the number of measurement occasions. If you within subject designs, have in mind that within subject designs usually have smaller error terms compared to cross-sectional designs. In determining what is the adequate sample size, power analysis helps, but compared to cross-sectional designs, power analysis in longitudinal designs is quite complex because it takes into account the number of subject, number of measurement occasions, what kind of growth curve are you modeling? Is it a linear or non-linear? And the variability of change over time. Main suggestions in that regard that If you add more subjects to your study, that will reflect, of course, on between person effects. And if you add more measurement occasions, it will affect within person effects. The next important aspect of longitudinal design is the number of measurement occasions, number of waves you need. Well, while equal spacing between those measurements, let's call them waves, between those waves is somewhat less important. For example, you're conducting your study that your data collection period lasts for 3 months. Of course, that the person who is recruited at the beginning of that period has a 3 months lag to the individual or participant at the end of the recruitment phase. So in those terms, equal spacing in some fields and in some topics might be less important. But on the other hand, the number of time points, the number of time points or the number of waves is quite more important. It's important that you have it is important that you have enough of them that you can actually catch the change that you're aiming for. So here's a simple illustration. So you have a job satisfaction measured over a course of 12 months. So you have several possible assessments. Let's say you're measuring only job satisfaction in the first month and the 12th month. Then you're detecting a declining linear trend. If you're measuring in the first 6 and 12 months, then you're able to, those 3 waves that constitute longitudinal design, then you have the ability to detect non-linearity, which is present in this example. Then if you only take a chunk of it, only first chunk of 3 months, and you analyze that, you're going to overestimate negative slope. As you see, it is steeper in the first 3 months. But on the other hand, if you assess on the last 3 months, you're going to underestimate negative slope because it is basically plateauing. Regarding some basic guidelines for number of measurement occasions, and of course, space in between those measurement occasions. Well, review the literature, or if possible, observe if there is any kind of, let's call it, a natural dynamic of occurrence in your topic of measurement, or conduct interviews and observations with relevant subjects. So basically, number of waves and time lags extremely differ from topic to topic. Okay. Now we're going to talk about challenges. Actually, we're going to delve into the main part of this lecture. So we can divide challenges basically in 3 parts. First are the logistic ones. So you're aware that conducting longitudinal design is time-consuming, dependent on the number of waves and time lags you're having. So the recruitment due to the attrition almost always requires larger baseline samples. If you're, for example, if you're recruiting someone from schools, from other educational institutions, or so on, you have to keep in mind that all those accesses to participants might have gatekeepers. For example, like school principals, if you're recruiting pupils or high school students. And then you'll also have to think about motivating participants, particularly if you're conducting an online study. We'll have talk about a little bit more about incentives later on. Then you have methodological challenges. Well, the main one is basically attrition. That you have to, it is very important that you at least have some insight into the reasons why are you losing participants, because in the end that might produce specific bias that of course will affect your results, or either the interpretation of your results. The attrition might differ whether you conduct your study online or classroom based, or maybe using a commercial panel that also has the capabilities to track the same participants over several measurement occasions. The one thing that participants will get is that familiarity with your questions and your measurement instruments, because it might be the case that you're going to repeat some of your measures throughout the waves. One of the challenges is also to how to initially contact and then recontact your participants, particularly if you're doing an online survey, and what are the means or what are the modalities of linking those surveys. In terms of online, because you have to have some sort of context that is related then to the importance of the sharing anonymity. And on the other hand, if you're, for example, doing a paper pen data collection in schools, then you have to have a means of assuring privacy in classrooms and so on. And finally, of course, conducting longitudinal design, it lasts long. It's not uncommon that you'll need a research team, that you can't actually do everything on your own, and that that kind of conducting can be quite expensive. So just a few words about the project that I was involved in. Then I'm going to using that project and our experience, I'm going to suggest various recommendations, and I'm going to talk about the things that we didn't do quite well, some of our shortcomings, some of the things that we learned on the way, some of the things that if we were conducting this study one more time, that we will do completely different, and so on. So this is a four-year longitudinal study on adolescents age 16 or above. So mainly involved about sexual explicit material like pornography use and various aspects of their psychosocial well-being. So we had a bunch of collaborators. You see a bunch of topics that we delved into, and finally the whole project resulted with 40 published papers based on the data we have. Just a few more details about the data and what actually happened and how the study was going on. So our onset was in spring 2015. We were planning to do an online data collection using leaflet recruitment. Leaflets would be spread around schools by our students, and we were planning to have lottery-based incentives. So we were planning 6 waves with six waves in between. Then we started everything, and at first wave, everything went well. As you see, we had more than 2,000 participants. But please, I highlighted here what happened in the when we reached the second wave. The second wave, we had a huge dropout from our sample, and we got panicked. We seriously panicked. So we tried to find a solution for that. And the solution was quite a difficult one, but actually it worked in the end. The same year in winter, we started conducting a classroom-based data collection with the paper pen questionnaires in a smaller urban city in Croatia. Also planning to do 6 waves with basically the same time lag in between, but we haven't been using incentives because this is something we were doing on our own. This was not funded by our national science foundation, so no incentives involved for that arm of the study. But the thing is, as you can see, that although the baseline sample in Rijeka was smaller, it tended to be quite stable throughout time. So of course there was a dropout, there was some attrition, which was something that we expected, but we didn't have this chaos basically that happened between the first and the second wave in our Zagreb study. So what are the recommendations? What we have learned, and what can I share with you now? So one thing, okay, obtaining approvals. It's something that you basically need to do long before the data collection. It's about those gatekeepers. You need to announce, for example, the school principals, that you're going to visit them for several times. That you need their help, either to help from the school staff to help you organize when you will visit the classrooms, either to do the data collection or just to, for example, to remind or announce your next online data collection wave. Another thing that was that we did was developing a visual identity for our project. It needs to be something hip, catchy, simple, and of course, it's always good to have some designer or some of those sets of skills to help you help you with that. And of course, we were acquiring free feedbacks from selected high school students to tell us what do they think about our visual identity and how are we going to present ourselves as a project, as researchers, to our future participants. On that note, we also decided to develop, of course, recruitment leaflets with all the necessary information. But also, we did a small YouTube tutorial by having two young Croatian actors basically explaining what is the procedure, how do they register, what are the incentives, why are we doing that? Because kids tend to like video materials more than the huge chunks of text, of course. Then we set up the registration site and social media sites. For that study, we were using only Facebook because Facebook was quite popular among youngsters at a time. Then we decided, after discussion with some of the high school students, what are our incentives going to look like. So we decided to have a lottery-based incentive. And as you can see, here is the percentage of collected. It was a lottery-based incentive. We were giving away shopping mall gift cards at an amount of I think it was something like 10 euros in today's currency. So as you can see, not many lottery gift cards were collected at the first wave, but then when participation is subsequently in the following waves stabilized, the percentage of collected gift cards increased and remained stable. The other thing was that we need to assure confidentiality for our participants. So we used a separate database for contacts, for their emails that was provided through the registration website, and a separate database for questionnaire data. There is also, of course, a database that was linking those two, that was linking the contacts with the unique codes that were provided via leaflets. And the thing is that one of the team members was a colleague who's actually only involved in handling our databases. So we, as researchers, never actually had the opportunity or the need, basically, to see what does the contact database look like. So that was everything that was handled by him. And when we finalized the recruitment, when we finished our data collection, he raised the database with the context. So the only thing that remained was a database with the unique codes and the questionnaire data, of course, the thing that we needed most. So I mentioned that I'm going to talk about incentives. So of course, incentives have to be in the amount to show respect for participants' time and effort. So either it's money, gift cards, food vouchers, school supplies, telephone. It really depends on the population you're aiming for. But in determining adequate incentives, there are many factors that will affect that type of incentive. So it could be either by study budget or standard of living in a country, population of interest, or, for example, in our case, institutional or governmental policies. So we were not allowed to have monetary gifts, monetary incentives for our participants. That's why we were using gift cards from a particular shopping mall. Of course, some institutions even prescribe what is the highest amount of incentive that can be given away to participants. And finally, there are different models. These models tend to be also linked to the budget you have. For example, our budget wasn't large enough to incentivize each participant, but that is a possibility. For example, I'm doing a project now where I can incentivize each participant, which is wonderful. Then there's a model then where you can incentivize each participant, then give an extra incentive for each following wave of participation. So basically encouraging them to continue because every other wave will bring them more funds. there is a model of one prize lottery, so one huge prize, and then you have a lottery, or horizontal lottery. That is something that we use. So you have a number of awards, but with the same incentive amount, or pyramid or a model of pyramid lottery, where you have also a number of various awards. For example, various gift cards, but the monetary amount for each gift card differs. So you have something like, I don't know, 50 euros, 3 of them, 10 euros, 20 of them, and so on. The most important thing is to acquire feedback, and even if sometimes feedback is it's not enough to talk with several members of your key population before you start conducting your research. You should acquire feedback during the data collection. So just to return to our recommendations, of course, I mentioned in the previous slide that you need a field workforce. So we had our students that helped us recruit high school students, actually disseminate all those leaflet recruitments. And then you also have to prepare. It is a proper suggestion that you have to prepare various tracking forms, various Excel spreadsheets to track and coordinating and contacting either your field workforce or your gatekeepers, to track the number of your participants and so on. And here I would like to stress one particularly important tracking tool. It's also something that is one of our shortcomings in the studies. So in both cities, in Zagreb and in Rijeka, so we were planning our measures before each wave, which is fine, of course. But the better thing is that if you know that you're going to conduct, for example, 4 or 6 waves of study, to plan all of your measures upfront related to all the hypotheses or research questions you want to assess. I know that's a lot of work, even having in mind what has to be done before initiating the study, thinking about all of the papers, all of the research questions you want to conduct, you want to assess or examine with your longitudinal data before it even starts. Is a serious amount of work. But I really seriously encourage, because what might happen if you do it like we did. So planning our measures just before each wave and ending them. The thing is that you have some time varying measures and time invariant measures. And in the end, when we collected all of our data from all of our 6 waves, we were planning to do some hypotheses, to do some modeling. Then we realized that we don't have, for example, enough measures of some constructs. We have, for example, we measured it only twice. We wanted to do a mediation analysis. We needed 3 waves of that measurement. That happened because the idea for that hypothesis came after the data collection was finished. So there was no turning back. So we knew, okay, this is we asked about this thing, for example, 2 times, and basically we can't do anything with that. So it's always good to sum up. It's always good to divide your measures into time varying, time invariant, and spread them across all of your planned waves according to your research needs, to your research questions, and to your hypothesis. And that kind of Excel spreadsheets might be very handy, just to visualize everything, what measures you have and what measures should be included in the following waves. Now we are in period of during data collection. So if you're doing data collection in the classrooms, especially if you're doing something on the sensitive topics, it's actually imperative to use privacy panels, to very simple cardboard panels, to make a small voting booths for each student, so that he or she has a privacy while filling out the questionnaire. The other thing that you need to have in mind in classroom-based data collection is how will you code your questionnaires and how you link them across waves. For example, so the instructions are written in Croatia, but I will explain. So we're using a very simple code. So five alphanumeric code with 5 digits. So it was with a starting letter of your father's name, starts like this, sorry. Okay, so it was a starting letter of your father's name, starting letter of your mother's name, only the date of your birth. So just the day, not the month, and adding if you're a male or female. And that had enough discriminatory power to differentiate students within a classroom. At least we thought it was, until we stumbled upon several classrooms in several schools that had twins in the same classroom. So this kind of coding system was pointless, because we couldn't figure out who is who when we were linking the questionnaires in the subsequent waves. The other issue is that all of these instructions and these coding seems very simple. Your participants will make mistake, and you will have issues linking your questionnaires from wave to wave. Either they're going to do it either by mistake, write in the month instead of a day of their birth, switch the mother's or father's name, or, which is also very likely, they will do it on purpose. And of course you'll have a bunch of questionnaires, unlinkable questionnaires in your data set. So let's go further. Response tracking. So very important aspects as well. So if you're doing an online data collection and you're using emails to remind and invite your participants, you have to have in mind that, for example, minors or adolescents or high schoolers, they don't see an email something as important as for example, we do. They're using social media to communicate and so on. So it might be the thing that they're rarely checking emails, changing their emails, or they did use some other email when they were registering. So they're not, they're not following your announcements and your reminders. On the graph before, you can see what is the effect that was our response flow for third wave in Zagreb. You can see that the spikes were usually related to either the announcement on Facebook reminders, or reminders via mail, and so on. So reminding basically works. Besides tracking your response rate from the behind the scene, you also have to be in front of the scene by maintaining communication with your participants. So we found that repeated in-person visits to school, either we were doing online surveying in Zagreb. We noticed that we have to send our students back to the schools, back to the same classrooms to to remind our participants that the next wave will start in something like a week. So we were also using social media to post some very simple and interesting or funny results from the study, just to start engage in communication and actually to have some content on our social media. And we also, of course, we were using both social media and emails for announcements and reminders when our data collection period was on. As I mentioned, okay, this in-person visits. So I want to stress that here, for example, just to show an example. So at our second wave and a third wave, the average response rate was 32 and 49% for the schools that we were visiting, that our fieldwork force was visiting. In comparison to that, a lot lower response rate occurred when in schools that weren't visited by our field workforce, by our students. So this in-person effect is visible when you're visiting or not visiting your participants during or at least before your data collection period. The next thing is qualitative feedback, basically focus groups and interviews about the intention to drop out, about satisfaction with incentives, and so on. We were doing that before, and we were doing that during our data collection period, during our waves and so on. Mainly to see how we can amend the issues we have with attrition. So, for example, some of the suggestions we got can be implemented. That we need to do the questionnaires during class in the schools, or that prices were not particularly motivating, that we need to change the maybe the lottery model, and so on. Of course, some of the suggestions can't be implemented, so we can't make boys more mature, or we can't add more dirty questions to our questionnaire to make it more fun and appealing to some of the students. But nonetheless, this kind of feedback, even before and during the data collection, is really helpful, and it was really helpful for us. Finally, this is something that you can do also during and after data collection, is track your sampling flow. So here you can see this huge Excel sheet that has our online data from Zagreb for 6 waves, and classroom-based data from Rijeka for 6 waves, and also various combinations of participants. So participants that were participating only in first and third wave, first, second, third wave, and so on. So it's actually a very important piece of spreadsheet, because when you linked it with the other spreadsheet I mentioned that was important, the one that in which you have all of your measures posted, all of your measures mentioned, which indicator or which construct are you measuring at which wave, then you can see, okay, is this link, is this relation, is this association, is this hypothesis feasible? Because I do have the measures, but let's see, do I have enough participants plus measurement occasions? That is, do I have number of big enough amount of observation to assess that kind of hypothesis? As I mentioned, for example, some of the students, that while we were using that coding to link the questionnaires, of course, some of the students in high school deliberately made wrong inputs in those little boxes for those coding. So that's something we called unique. So we had it in each wave. It basically unlinked questionnaires. We couldn't find out which questionnaire was linked to which other in the previous waves or the subsequent waves. So a little bit more about the attrition. So we were asking ourselves, because we knew we have issue with attrition, we were asking ourselves, okay, besides the basic fact, who are the participants that are less likely to participate in following ways? But besides that, we were asking ourselves, are we maybe losing the most relevant participants first? Of course, that can be an issue for various analytical reasons and so on. So after we completed both of our data collections in both of cities, we did an analysis and published it about particularly vulnerable participants and attrition. So basically, what we were asking ourselves were participants that were particularly vulnerable to pornography use, according to set of relevant indicators. Were they more likely to drop out, to be lost to follow-up participants? Because if they are, we need to rethink majority of our main findings that, for example, assess negative effects of pornography use on various aspects of youth's life. So we were using both panels, either the online panel and the classroom-based panel, and we were also trying to see if there is a difference based on the data collection mode. So what we found out that first we detected that we have basically three types of attrition. So it was attrition, early attrition, later attrition, and participation gaps. So, and the results show that the early attrition was substantially higher among vulnerable participants compared to other participants, and that there is a difference between data collection modes. That vulnerable participants, there was a vulnerable participants produced participation gap. They were missing out some of the data recruitment, the data collection waves, only in classrooms, not in an online study. But to some of those results, we do believe that that adolescents that are under risk of adverse outcomes associated with pornography were less likely to complete all of the waves in our study. And that's something that kind of analysis is something that I would encourage you to do as well. So not just seeing what kind of attrition you have, but seeing, are you basically losing your most vulnerable or most important types or subgroups of your participants. So based on that experience, we recommend several things. Of course, modality of data collection, it differs if it's the classroom based or online. You need to have resources for a large baseline sample, and also think about, besides, instead of using online data collection platforms, are the, for example, cell phone applications more efficient to reduce attrition. For attrition, you need to be prepared either by having a questionnaire short, of course, doing a visual identity for your study, having desirable incentives, and conducting focus groups about potential attrition, and how to delay, not even to prevent, but if you know you're going to have some sort of attrition, but how to delay that attrition. So of course, it's reminding your participants, it's communicating with them with, for example, interesting findings, adding or modifying incentives, or, for example, having your little agents within your peer groups, having particularly motivated, and then, of course, incentivize participants who would encourage other participants, other peers to continue to participate. This is a brief tour into small analytical part, a very simple way to assess your attrition. So just for example, you're assessing attrition from first two waves of your study, from T1, time 1, and time 2. In time 1 baseline, you have 100 students, and in 100 participants, and in time 2, you have 75. So 25 are lost to follow-up. So just by using binary logistic regression analysis, you want to answer the question, which participants have higher odds for dropping out? You simply use your data from T1, you code your code your dependent variable into two groups. So, for example, 0 is participants that participated in the subsequent waves, but in the one and the other code for the dichotomous DV is the ones that were lost to follow-up, and you add all the relevant characteristics that might inform you about the way of, I mean, the mode of attrition you have related to your participants' characteristics. In other words, which type or subgroup of participant is more likely to drop off, for example, in the next wave. And of course, this kind of analysis you can repeat in each subsequent wave, just to have a clear, even before you finish your final wave, that you have a clear vision of your, okay, what's happening, what kind of attrition I have. Okay, the next topic is actually the final topic, and I'll be very brief regarding this, is choosing an analysis framework. So just recently there is this paper was published in a journal of developmental cognitive neuroscience, but disregard the topic. It's actually a very good premier guidelining paper with small decisions trees, how to choose your analysis framework, your analytic approach. I did very simple. I will present a very simple way. I will present two modeling frameworks, and I believe I do have time for one example from the structural equation modeling, and that's about it. That's the most I could fit in this lecture. So basically, you'll find that there are two general modeling frameworks. One is multi-level, sometimes called mixed effects modeling or hierarchical modeling. So there are some specific advantages of those. For example, multi-level modeling allows you to estimate higher levels of nesting. So in multi-level modeling, longitudinal multi-level modeling, you basically have two levels. So the first level are your measurement occasions, your waves, and on the second levels are individuals in which those measurement occasions are nested in. So, but you can go beyond the individual, and then you can have, for example, schools or classrooms or schools or some higher order measurement. So beyond the individual. The main thing is that, of course, the repeated measurements are on the lowest level. Multi-level modeling is somewhat limited in respect to measurement error in your variables of interest, because you have to include them as either as manifest variables or as composite measures. That's something structural equation modeling deals a little bit better. But on the other hand, you have an opportunity for a very simple inclusion of various time varying or time invariant covariates. So time varying, like for example, here is the relationship satisfaction mentioned, or time invariant, like for example, gender. And the final thing is that compared to structural equation modeling, you can only assess relative fit for your multi-level models. That is, you can compare compare fit of the similar models. You don't have an absolute fit. How well does your data represent the model you have? On the other hand, as a second general modeling framework is already mentioned structural equation modeling. So in this case, you have repeated measures as latent factors. So of course, they can be as manifest variables in the model, but you have the opportunity to include latent constructs, which as a result allow you to control the effect of measurement errors in your variables of interest, so either predictors or either outcomes. Compared to multi-level modeling, here you have opportunity to test to check your absolute model fit by using several of different fit indices like CFI, so it's comparative fit indexes, or Tucker-Lewis index, and so on. There are many of them. And structural equation modeling is particularly suitable if you're planning to do some sort of longitudinal mediational analysis, much more suitable than, for example, multi-level. But to sum up, similarities between both of those modeling frameworks actually outweigh their differences. In some instances, for some research questions, you could basically get the same results from the multi-level modeling and from the structural equation modeling. Of course, there are some considerations that might turn your decision or need or necessity towards one or another. Some of those are, of course, your research question and hypothesis. Then your variable type. Either you have, for example, for your dependent variable, do you have a categorical variable, a dichotomous, or classical nominal variable, or you have a continuous quantitative variable, and so on. Do you have your variables only in its manifest form, or do you have a latent construct that you want to include in your models? There is also an issue of number of covariates. Much more easier to add greater number of covariates in multi-level modeling. It works as a regression than in structural equation modeling. So there's a thing about your covariates. Are they time variant or time invariant? Both of time variant and time invariant covariates can be included in both of those frameworks. the issue of balanced or unbalanced, or the level of balancedness of your data, meaning that are your measurement equally spaced on the one hand, and do you have maybe missing data? For example, structural equation modeling by using full information maximum likelihood estimator, one of many, actually handles the issue of missing data quite well. So when I say missing data, I really mean missing data from the participants that participated in particular wave, not the missingness that was produced by the attrition. So those are two different things. Then there is the type of change you want to model. So is it linear, is it non-linear, and so on. What is the growth curve you're aiming at? Are you planning to assess any kind of higher order nesting? Yes, you can do that with multi-level modeling. Of course, there's this hybrid of multi-level structural equation modeling, combining the best of two worlds. But when thinking about combining best of two worlds or the least of two worlds, you have to think which software you're going to use. So softwares vary. For example, some of the softwares that have the modules to assess longitudinal data might not have the estimators that you need because, for example, your dependent variable is dichotomous or something like that. Or basically you're maybe acquainted with some of the software, some of the not, some not. So you have to have in mind which statistical package you're going to use to assess your data. So now I'm going to slowly go towards the end of the presentation. So I've chosen one example of analysis. So from the structural equation modeling framework. So it's latent growth curve modeling, used very often. So basically, it enables an examination of between person difference over time, of course, by estimating within person latent trajectories of change. In other words, if you have several measures, if you have several measures on several occasions, then you will get the latent growth curve modeling will produce a latent intercept, which will represent the initial level of measured construct, and a latent slope. Of course, measured construct over time. This might sound a bit abstract. So let me show you just a brief example. So imagine this: you have relationship satisfaction measured at six measurement points. So each line represents an individual trajectory. Here are linear, but they don't have to be linear. So each participant has its intercept and has its slope, of course. So that's as I mentioned, latent growth curve modeling generates a latent intercept and a latent slope, which is shown in a next slide. So if you want to estimate between person differences, but taking into account within person change, then a latent curve will be generated, which of course doesn't have to be linear as well. That latent curve has its mean intercept, and also it has its intercept variance. It has its mean slope, and it has its slope variance. And by that, you basically get a model like this. But in short, disregard many of these numbers and so on. I just want to show you this is the basically quite simple model in a way that has only two constructs measured over time. So it was stamped at sexually explicit material, so it's porn, sexually explicit material realism. So over time, so it has its latent intercept and latent slope, and it has pornography use over time. So it's measured over three waves. Both of the constructs are measured over 3 waves, and for pornography use, it also generated an intercept and a slope. Then you can on that basic dual domain model, so it has parallel estimation of two constructs. You can add variety of covariates. For example, this is one time invariant covariate. So it was the age of first pornography use among participants, or for example, some trait like sensation seeking that was measured 3 times. So that was time varying covariate. The benefits, the advantages of this approach is that you can assess multiple constructs simultaneously. For example, porn realism and pornography use, as shown here on the example. It can handle unequally spaced measurement occasions and nonlinear trajectories and partially missing data. As a reminder, it is the structural equation modeling framework, so it uses full information maximum likelihood, so you don't have to worry a lot about your missing data. Although, maybe a thing that I forgot to mention before, it is preferred that your data in your data set is missing completely at random or missing at random, that you don't have a kind of systematic missingness in your data. For example, it's like a sort of systematic missingness. Missingness in your data might be the attrition, because it's not in random within one wave. And finally, just as a way to illustrate the diversity of potential interpretations. So you have two constructs. You have, for each construct, you have a slope and you have intercept, and those two constructs, construct A and construct B, are correlated in one way or another, are either positively correlated or negatively correlated. So, for example, if you see that in your construct A, on a descriptive level, you have an increasing trend, and in your construct B, you have an also increasing trend. And if you find in between those two slopes a positive correlation, then you will say that the higher increase in construct A has results in a more substantial, this is important, increase in the construct B, and so on. And you have various combinations between interpreting correlations between two slopes. So between two changes. Of course, you can also interpret the starting point at one construct, for example, the intercept. So the intercept is the mean at baseline compared to the growth. For example, if you have, let's go back to this table. So if you have increasing trend in your construct B, and you have a positive correlation with the intercept of construct A, you would say that the higher the baseline assessment of construct A, the more substantial increase in construct B. So and you can reflect everything that to negative correlations. So if you're planning to use or will use latent graphical modeling, I hope this sum up of how to interpret various correlations between two constructs, either slopes or intercepts, will be helpful to you. So basically, I would like to finish now with this chapter, and maybe just to mention a few thoughts as a final remark. So you probably have noticed or seen or even written this common statement, let's call it a mantra in research papers, that more longitudinal research is needed. I know I did. I wrote it several times, but most of the times I wrote it because it was in fashion. I wasn't actually thinking a lot about what is the time and effort and costs on the one side for conducting a longitudinal study, having in mind all of the challenges I've mentioned before, and whether that will produce a sound empirical either or theoretical contribution. So we do tend to say yes, we do need more longitudinal studies, but we do need more well-conducted longitudinal studies according to the best possible guidelines that will in the end make a certain empirical or theoretical contribution. Even well-conducted longitudinal studies that basically confirm the things that we already know by our previous cross-sectional data, cross-sectional studies, might be a either time or effort or cost waste, or all three of those. So in just as a final remark, so when planning longitudinal data, plan well, because yeah, it lasts a lot, it's difficult, and it costs a lot. Okay, thank you. At the very end, because this presentation will be part of the recording as well, at the very end you have some literature, among which I want to point out the McCormick's paper with the guidelines for choosing an analytical framework. The topic I wasn't able to delve into more detail for this presentation, for this lecture. So thank you.
For more information, visit www.coordinate-network.eu.